So Emily Weber knew what it meant to be the other, to be the minority. She was born in South Korea, and then she was adopted by a white conservative Christian farm family in Kansas. But when she came to the Missouri House as the first Asian American woman elected, a part of the minority party, a part of the Democrat, it was still tough. It was November 2020, and you remember, kind of the height of the COVID situation, and she had legislators there in the majority party who were insistent on calling it the China virus and using other anti-Asian sentiments. And she kept trying to call them out because, as we can remember, there was a lot of anti-Asian violence. Remember the woman whose face was cut up with the box cutter? Another woman who was slapped and set on fire? And then that night when 8 Asian Americans were killed in a rampage across Asian spas. So here she was in this situation of being the other, which is often a place of feeling violated or even the victim of violence. And we see that not only in small interactions, we see it on the world stage, right? I mentioned this in my little blurb this week, that since September 11th, we've conducted more wars, more military strikes than previous. And almost all of those have been against countries where people are primarily brown and black, right? It's easier to strike people when you've othered them, when you're the person in power and you're like, these people aren't me. So this morning we come to this different passage, and it's a reminder that othering people is hardly new. Jesus meets the Samaritan woman at the well. Jews and Samaritans did not hang out together. They'd been enemies for centuries, and Jews would walk an extra 9 miles around a Samaritan city not to go there. And this is not just Jesus encountering a Samaritan, it's Jesus encountering a woman, right? Women and men, first century Palestine, even today in the Middle East, often don't share spaces. There's gendered spaces. You know, men are in public, they're in the work, they're in government, women are in the private spaces. And even when you have within the home, you often would have, depending on the size of the home, separate spaces for men and women, even separate spaces to keep clothing. But Jesus, being the boundary breaker, he's come through Samaria, this town, and it's noon, he's hot, he goes straight to this well, and he meets this woman, which is already odd, because when women did go to public spaces, they tended to go together, like in the morning and the evening. But here it's noon, and Jesus encounters this woman, and he says to her, "Give me a drink of water." And she says, "Why are you, a Jew, asking a drink of me, a Samaritan? Because we don't share anything together." And then right there, they begin talking right past each other, which probably is not that surprising, because whenever we come into any kind of encounter, right, whether it's with our partner or our parent, or whether it is with someone who is a perfect stranger, we're coming not just to the moment, right, but we are coming with everything that we have ever brought before, all of our encounters, all of our expectations, all of our baggage. And, you know, so easily, you know how easily conversations can go off the rails, even with the people you love the most, because all of that. So here's these two people meeting each other, and what they're doing is like talking past each other. She's talking about water, that's like physical water that quenches your thirst, and he's talking about water that like quenches the spirit. And then, you know, the subject moves on, and they're going to kind of like what her marital history is, which is probably in this passage more of an opportunity to show that Jesus is a person who's all-knowing. And then from that, she moves it into kind of a theological conversation about where should we worship and where's the place to be worshiped. It's just this odd conversation, and they're meeting at a well. And in scriptural world, a well is a place that can be a place of connection, conversion, courtship. It can be a place of transformation. Remember Genesis 24, Abraham is looking for a wife for his son Isaac, and he sends his servant off, and he says it's going to be at the well where you meet this woman, and you'll ask for a drink of water, and she's going to do what? Water the camels too. She's going to like see the actual need. And so this well becomes this place where these two people who are very, very different manage to meet. And they're changed. Jesus is changed. We don't usually notice that part. The woman is changed. She goes off. She tells people. She begins to witness to him. But Jesus is changed too. We kind of miss that part. But remember, like a few chapters later, Someone accuses Jesus of being a demon and a Samaritan, and he says, I'm not a demon, but he doesn't say anything about the Samaritan, right? I mean, he's been transformed, and there's been this moment of reconciliation where they truly meet. Isn't that sweet, right? But it just, in real life, is just not quite that easy to be reconciled to people who are very different than you. My good friend Rabbi Alpert, you all know him. He's in this like 8-month-long intensive course on conflict resolution with some leader, global leader, and a bunch of rabbis. And this person has honed this process for conflict resolution that has 8 steps. And the first 3 steps are self-reflection. They're about knowing who you are. They're about knowing what you believe. They're about being absolutely grounded in your own spirit so that when you come to another person who disagrees vehemently with you, you're not in such a posture of defensiveness or not really knowing what you believe. And I thought about that this week when I was sitting down to have coffee with Audrey Curtis, one of our amazing teenagers. And Audrey was kind of wrestling and thinking about her own faith and what she believes. And, like pretty much most of our young people, goes to a high school where most of the people who are Christian are far more conservative and have narrow beliefs, right? Some of these narrow beliefs include, justification for the war or justification for excluding queer folks or whatever. And then you have other friends who are progressive, and they're like, yeah, I don't need that Christianity at all, right? And so listening to Audrey talk about, did she think this or did she think that? And she didn't know whether she should. And I just thought, you know what? I am 63 years old and I feel the exact same as Audrey. 100%. And I sit down with people at this church every single week. And they say, I don't really know if I should come to church because I'm not sure about this, I'm not sure about that. I'm like, what does that have to do with anything? Really? And maybe that's because I grew up in a church that was really about right behavior and not right belief. And so when I hear this passage, I got to be honest, in John's gospel, which I've kind of struggled with, all this language about being born again and being born above and eternal life and living water, and right or wrong, it just kind of bounces off of me. And I'm like, what is that about? And I think part of it is because I grew up in a church where when we thought about living water, it was really clear that was about taking care of creation, right? Not the only thing, but it was. It was about making sure there's clean water for everyone, and that countries didn't use weapons against other people's desalination plants, right? And one of my earliest memories, it was in 1977, I was 15, and we had a big boycott going on, which for a chocolate lover is a situation. Nestle boycott. Some of you may remember it was about bottle babies. Do you all remember this, some of you? And it was about how Nestle was going into poor villages across sub-Saharan Africa and other places and giving new mothers free infant formula along with these bottles, the kind that are kind of like not the clear but kind of opaque ones. And the women would go home when they would have this infant formula, which would run out about the time that their milk had dried up. And there was no source of clean water. They had no money to buy the formula. And not being clear, not reading the instructions in English, some thought you could just put water in there and the bottle would magically make it in formula. So more children were dying and becoming malnourished. And there was, this big boycotting. And I understood as a young person, that's what it means to be a person of faith, right? Is to stand up and say, hello, we are not going to put profit in front of people. That's not what we're about. No, we're about caring for all God's people. We are about standing up. As I got older, I was in seminary. I still remember reading Søren Kierkegaard, Danish philosopher from the 1800s, reading his book Works of Love, which I've talked about many times, which is a commentary on 1 Corinthians 13. And it is still, to me, probably the most powerful thing. Love believes all things, love hopes all things, love endures all things, love never ends. As much as you can believe this place is going to go down in flames, I can believe there's a hopeful room tomorrow. And Kierkegaard's big belief was that love, while we are finite, right? Like we have to be careful. We kind of just throw ourselves in front of ice. We have to be careful with our bodies. But love is different. Love is this living water. It is grounded in this grace of God. It is grounded in this eternal spring that just gushes and gushes, and there is no shortage to how much you can love. And that is so true. I know that is true. I know that is true because I love you all so much. And every time somebody new comes in, I love that person so much. As I could love Just there's love, right? And that's what Kierkegaard is talking about. He's talking about this living water that is this love that connects us, that makes it possible to just love and care. So that's kind of like where the whole thing goes in this conflict resolution scheme, except for, like Rabbi Alpert pointed out, not everybody is a good partner for conflict resolution. Some people are not trustworthy. Some people are corrupt to the point. And so, making a connection with everyone is really difficult, which is what Rebecca Solnit said. Like, we have to call out the sexism, the homophobia, the racism, the fascism. We're not doing the world any favor by sitting on our hands and not calling a spade, right? So it's this kind of like calling out, being absolutely firm about what you believe, but also remaining attached to love, believing that somehow you can love the other person. And that was like the 8th step in conflict resolution, is imagining the world you want to be, imagining what that world would look like, right? Where if every kid could get up tomorrow, have enough to eat, right? Have a school, have a house, have covering, all of that. And which brings me back to Emily Weber. A few weeks ago, there was a Midtown Democrat meeting. Ben and Shelley started that group, and Emily Weber spoke. She happens to be our representative, along with Ashley Ahn, who's the minority leader of the Missouri House, and Patty Lewis. And they spoke very strongly, and it made me think of our own Cindy Holscher over on the Kansas side, and how challenging it is to be in the House when you're in the minority party. That you're often working with people who refuse to take guns away from people who have been convicted of domestic violence, right? That's what we're talking, right? The same people who cannot pass enough anti-trans bills. Like Missouri, I think, just passed 3 on Monday. Like, we're number 1. And we are 49th in education and healthcare, but we're number 1 in attacking trans people, folks. Doesn't that make you feel safe and good, right? It's just insane. And so hearing these legislators, man, and thinking about Cindy, when many of us have known Cindy forever, the strength and the courage it takes to keep going there and keep standing up and keep speaking out, right? But the other thing that was so interesting about hearing these 3 people speak was the love they expressed too, on both sides of the aisle. Hearing them talk about one of the most rabid right-wing extreme guys, Freedom Caucus in Missouri, can't pass enough crazy legislation, and how much they had come to love him, his wife who's had breast cancer for 4 or 5 years, know about his children, his hobbies, how they'd sat down. They talked about just pouring their heart out, right? Trying to imagine a world where somehow we're able to care for people, standing firm, right? Standing absolutely firm about what we believe, but still somehow loving and caring and seeing the humanity in the others. Which made me think about one of my favorite scriptures, which was written by Andrea Gibson, the queer, feminist, non-binary poet laureate of Colorado. Andrea died, sadly, this last year of ovarian cancer. Probably 3 years ago, I played a clip, some of you may remember, of their poem about the MAGA hat man in the chemo room, and read some of it, and it's so important to me. I don't want to read it again. In this poem, Andrea talks about the world Andrea wants to live in, a world where nobody wears political attire to the chemo room. Didn't the MAGA hat man get the memo that Andrea had sent out that no one should do that, even though all of Andrea's clothing has slogans like "Rest in peace, patriarchy," and "Queer do," but never wearing any of that to the MAGA hat room, to the chemo room, because Andrea so much wants the world to be a place where no one sees Andrea as enemy, where no one sees anyone as the enemy, where everyone is rooting for everyone else to survive, where MAGA hat man is so kind that MAGA hat man would come right up to Andrea and say, "Andrea, I'm so sorry that you had to have your ovaries removed. You can have one of mine. Here, just take it." Right? That's the room that Andrea wants to live in, the world Andrea wants to live in. And in this poem, Andrea talks about MAGA hat man, how Andrea recognizes MAGA hat man, recognizes the same anguish and hurt that Andrea had felt. Here's what I know, Andrea says. MAGA hat man has an angst inside him that I recognize from all the times I had a pain so deep that I thought peace was shallow and blame was the only way to dig it out. The kind of digging that hurts like hell. It's the opposite of living. Hoarding ideas that are so wrong they chase the soul out of the body that believes them. When you are there, you think you know everything and you can't be convinced you don't. Something I don't know right now. I don't know how I'm going to keep coming here week after week after week. I'm going to keep coming here and seeing these guys week after week after week. And then one week I won't. Their chairs will be empty, and I'll have no words for the feelings inside me. I'll only have tears that I will struggle and struggle to explain to anyone outside of this place, because everything in my politics knows the middle ground is where this earth will go to die. But when anyone in this room leaves this world, part of me does too. I feel it in every cell of me now that I'm not a me. I'm one eyelash on the eye of humanity, holding on for dear, dear life, trying to get the eyelashes beside me to look in the right direction before we are all wiped off the face of this planet that desperately wants us to live of natural causes like kindness, like caring, like knowing these bodies are clothes we are all growing out of so quickly, until one day we will be only souls that can see that we have always wanted the exact same wish to come true. I know we will know that when we leave this world. The planet is just so desperate for us to know it now, too. The planet and the planet's people are so desperate for us to know that, too. To know that we're one humanity, that we're called to care for one another, that we're called to stand firm on what we believe and still find a way to open our arms to those who are wounded around us. So may this season be a time of clarity. May it be a time when we commit to finding the ways that the chemo room and the classroom, from the State House to our own house, can be a place of meeting, a place where we come together, a place where we affirm and see the humanity and the love and the divinity in one another. Amen.